Chapter 11. I had to struggle with everything that had happened, mourning my father's death and decision of my father's estate. My attorney and my stepmother's attorney were going back and forth. I had some issues with her getting an additional 65,000 plus 50% of my father's net value. Finally, I pulled the trigger and agreed to the 50-50 split and alteration of the will, giving her 50% of the earnings and getting to keep the house. She took possession of my father's belongings and had several issues with it, but I allowed it. She moved out in June, and I got my father's first disbursement of cash. I made a decision, since I was going to be living alone, I needed to get a dog. I went to the pound at the SPCA and looked around at the dogs. I spotted this German Shepherd Lab Husky Chow Mutt. Without hesitation, I got him. His name was Fontaine. Name that was already given to him, but since he was a boy dog, didn't know why he had a female name. What? I kept the name, hence Fontaine became part of my world. So it was me and Fontaine at my house. I refurbished the place and bought a Wurlitzer jukebox and new furniture to fit my lifestyle. My own personal man cave to entertain the ladies. I worked at this courier company throughout this time, working long hours and felt like I wanted to get into my own business of some sort. At the time, I worked with a dispatcher named Nigel, who I became friends with. Had some drinking time and only hung out briefly. Dealing with work and dealing with other stuff, I wanted to make sure that some of this money I inherited was being put away or invested into property or a brick and mortar business. Kevin and I did a remote show in a fine dining restaurant trying to promote their business. We had a promotion of guests winning prizes for eating at the restaurant. So Kevin and I got into show mode and started telling our usual jokes while people were eating in this restaurant. Knowing we had to keep the PG version, I had to catch myself a few times from not going into the X rated version of the show. So everybody had a ticket and we drew matching tickets from a price box. While Kevin and I did our usual entertainment banter, we drew up tickets while people would win gift certificates they had after we called out their numbers in drawing. Prices range from free dessert on the next visit to 20% off on their next visit. We did a few shows to try to build their business up for the customers to come back. Also, we had a few times when we played bingo and the customers drew up numbers through us calling out bingo numbers where they would yell out bingo. These were ideas that I came up with, along with doing more promotional work. We also worked with another restaurant called Potter Pub. It was a well known British pub back in the day, based ran by local mom and pop's establishment. We had our own American Idol locally by being hosted by Rockets. Ugh. The group was hosted by Paul Redacted and Wendy Pace. They had asked me to be a judge, and I brought Kevin on to be a judge. So we had this 2 month project of judging locals in Richmond and surrounding areas to judge them and sent the best of these qualifiers to the next level, which eventually, if they made it that far, they would be on being judged by Simon Cowell himself. IT was a fun project, and being able to work with Wendy Pace and adding Kevin to the mix became a fun project. I made sure, though, out of the judges that ones that I wanted to win would win. I remember a girl named Lindsay who played the fiddle and did some country music. I knew who was going to win. I wasn't big on country music at the time, but I knew she was the winner in my eyes and was the one who needed to represent the state of Virginia for American Idol. Made sure Kevin agreed on her as well, as Kevin wanted to keep his pick secretively. Needless to say, after the 2 month project, Lindsay was the winner and represented Richmond and came in second in the state of Virginia. So she never represented the state, she came in high with her fiddle and singing. We promoted all of this on the show. Like mentioned previously, we did commercials for the Insurance Doctor, Taboo Lingerie, and Potter's Pub. We practically gave these commercials away for peanuts that my technical producer created. Once again, Jim Redacted. Style Weekly did at least 2 write ups about our show, calling me the Howard Stern of Richmond, It did another cover on the whole public access network featuring other mundane shows, and then saying our show was the most popular show on the network at the access channel. I thought so, at least, along with my cast and crew. While we did our shows, the cast was Kevin, Vince, and others when we could get them on. Still looking for a female co host and got one. We had Wendy on her first live show, and then we had this lady known as Psychic Brenda, who also had a show on the network channel. We combined our efforts while she was on a few of my shows back in the 90s and came on one of my shows talking about the Iraq War and the capture of Saddam Hussein. She was giving readings to different callers who called the show for their readings. We started getting an element of garbage calling in on the shows. Detractors and people who would call our shows an excessive amount of time to insult me and my cast, better known as prank callers. Local guy who moved to England called himself Dr. Quinn on an internet site called Something Awful, who started to attack my show and myself. Definitely wasn't Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman, lol, but some punk who had ties to England and moved back overseas. Punk's real name was James Redacted. He was the catalyst and the one that started these internet attacks with more to come and be talked about. It was actually mentioned by my mechanic who had a shop downtown and worked in German import cars. He mentioned that my show was being broadcast on the internet and I had no idea of how it was. He worked on my BMW convertible, in which I eventually had sold to him the car while its upkeep was getting out of hand. While we did more shows in the mid 2000s, we had begun to get vile and disgusting calls. Finally, we stopped taking calls altogether until the studio manager insisted we did. We were strongly urged to inform by the reasons on why we didn't want to. We started each show with a show intro, and then Kevin doing his commentating, and then I would come into the room with some intro music of some sort. I wanted so desperately to get a female co host, and we finally did for a short, brief time. While the whole long distance Sue saga was continuing, I dated a girl by the name of Karen, girl who worked at Kroger from 2003 to 2004. She had worked as a front desk girl with customer service at Kroger. Karen eventually moved in with me and we became an item. Hence, there was my new female co host. Little did I know until later that Karen was a self proclaimed witch. When I say a witch, she would do magic spells and kinds of acts of that sort. Karen had a very traumatic situation that happened when she lost her son to when her daughter and her son were horseplaying around in the house. Accidentally, the little girl Karen's daughter pushed her brother to the Venetian blind of the window and it wrapped around the child. It cut off the circulation of her child, and Karen found out after the fact. My heart went out to her, and I felt bad for her. I would always cut her pass when we got into arguments, knowing she had that tragic event she had to deal with. Beyond all of that, Karen was a practicing witch. She moved in with me from a real messed up so called triangle relationship with a couple, involving herself to date both the guy and the girl who were both in a relationship. So Karen appeared on my shows with that North Carolina accent from where she was from. So Karen took over the reins and blended in with me and Kevin on the show. While Wendy and Paul appeared also on one of our shows along with Karen and Vince. Now after the show we would all have get together and all had a party after we finished up a blocked season for the year. Everything seemed to be going well with Karen until she tried to go back to the place she was staying at. Tried to spend nights over there when she was in a committed relationship with me. Her child would try to ride my dog Fontaine like he was a horse, and I told her, "You don't do that." When I would bring that up to Karen about controlling her kid, she snapped at me. I told her that I didn't want her kid on top of my dog like that, and if he bit her, she had asked for it. Karen also had an issue of sleepwalking in the middle of the night while we were sound asleep. She would walk into the closet thinking she was going to the bathroom. One time peed on the floor thinking she was using the toilet. One night Nigel had this party, so we went to Nigel's and had a karaoke night. Ugh. Nigel just bought some equipment and we sang and drank throughout the night. Karen passed out on the guest bed at Nigel's, and I told Karen, "Get up. We have to leave." She wouldn't get up while I kept telling her, "We have to leave." So I told Nigel I'm leaving, and she needed to be at work at 7 a.m. the following morning. I tried to pick her back up for her only to get loose and crawl back on the bed. I was trying to get her in my car, but she would each time crawl back into his house. So finally I said, "Make sure she gets to work," and out of frustration left her there, knowing right then and there our relationship was on shaky ground. One of the people from the party brought her back to the house. She went to work. That same week, she claimed that she didn't feel right, and she was raped by one of Nigel's friends. I simply said, "What? Why didn't you say something?" And then I told her to report it if it happened, but she refused to do so. When approaching and asking Nigel about what happened, he uttered, "That woman is crazy. Nobody messed with her." I said, "That's not what she said." Finally, after a 6-month relationship, I came to the conclusion it wasn't going to work out, and she made up the whole story just to poke at me, but never went through with reporting it to the authorities. She would still contact Nigel after she and I broke up. He told me to take her back because she is bothering him. I replied, "She is not my problem anymore. She and I broke up." Make mention she would get really jealous whenever I brought up Sue's name. It didn't matter at the end because the writing was on the wall. Kevin and myself continued in dealing with trolls calling up the show. I became more alert to what these imbeciles were doing by stealing my copyright and making me look like a complete cartoon. One evening after Kevin and I finished up a show, the program director made mention there were some people outside who wanted our autograph. So I poked my head outside, and two young kids who were students at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth Union, a campus college in downtown Richmond, approached me, saying, "Gorgeous George, we are fans of your show and want so desperately to get an autograph and appear on your show." I said to them, "I'm flattered, but I can't guarantee you a spot on the show, but I'll sign anything you have for me to sign." So Kevin and myself signed an autographs and trinkets they brought with them and said, "We shall see if we can, but I don't just let anybody on my show unless I know them or they are musical artists." The kid's name was Michael Redacted, along with some other kid that didn't get his information. Though in that brief interlude didn't seem right, and it felt to me they were trolls pretending they were fans. Whatever the case, my initial thought was correct, because they posted the pictures they took with us on that something awful site. The internet war started because these punks kept getting more vile and attacked me and Kevin. I bantered back with these individuals and became a flame war on the craft site. They were a bunch of compulsive masturbators and became more of an issue when these VCU punks started attacking me and my show. Every Thursday night, we would have a block of time, and their masturbators would call every time and every week. This kid, Michael Redacted, was a hideous looking creature. My nickname for him was Red Pube Face because he had red hair and a red beard that he peeled from his private area. Pubic hair. Lol. Hence the name Red Pube Face. LOL finally came out and made threats about a group of them coming to the station while we were shooting a show. For a while, I didn't post anything in retaliation on the shit post, just lurking on the site. So I saw this on their page where they had planned to attack the station. Ironically, it just so happened that it was during a presidential election between Bush and Kerry. The other show was interviewing the vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. So the misdirectional game and trap game was on. Kevin and I spoke on the phone about scheming against these bitches. Kevin said,
Get them, and get them good.
this was all explained in detail about what the plan was. I spoke with the station manager and told him what these bitches were planning on doing and that they would be banging on the door. I said to call the police or tell the show's producer to do so. So what I was planning was ingenious to get these bitches arrested. So while they thought my show was going to be aired, the other show was airing in place of mine for ironically not only to get these bitches, but supposedly that was the only time the vice presidential candidate could appear on that show. It was game time. Later on, I figured since I wasn't on that night, why not set the attention on me walking up to them? I made a phone call to the Richmond Police Department and explained the story to them, and they were ready to come when being signaled about these kids banging at the door. The games were about to begin. Down the 2 blocks, there they were. About 10 to 15 of them were walking down the street. I parked my car 2 blocks away from the station and got out of my car and walked in their direction. After seeing them, I called the police and said they were 2 blocks down the street and to come now. The police were notified. So they walked up to the station, yelling and screaming, banging on the window of the station. I caught up to them and said, "Are you looking for someone?" They started walking to me, saying, "Why aren't you on camera?" I said, "What's to you? Why are you all here yelling and screaming, causing a ruckus?" They started shouting obscenities and vile disgusting shit directed at me, asking me if they took me off because of the amount of complaints the station had. Then I smiled and said, "Don't you all worry, all your concerns will be addressed. The fireworks are about to begin." Just then, on cue, 2 police cars came up to the station and dispersed, the bitches of the property saying if they don't move, they will be arrested. I smiled and laughed at them and pointed to the main ones that had planned the ruckus and attack. They were all walking in the opposite direction with their heads in between the asses. Glorious day for Gorgeous George. Action was taken, and these thugs are going to be arrested as the decoy lingering outside of the building signaling for the police. Glorious day, October 24th, 2004. I remember the day well. They were so pissed off they called back the station questioning the show that was on, where I was, and why are they airing that show in place of mine. They called the police back because the candidate was going to get those bitches arrested for bothering him. It was poetic justice that night. Kevin had a belly laugh with me, and I thought it was funny as hell. It was outstanding. It was a brilliant plan that I came up with, the blessing of the station manager. Couldn't turn out any better. Though this didn't stop these bitches while they tried to get their own show. The station manager met up with them and had granted them a show on Wednesday night, opposite of mine. This after I told them they would have a snowball's chance in hell getting a show. AJ did the unthinkable and granted these bitches a show. I told them they were the ones responsible for the disturbance that night on the other show. Didn't seem to faze him, saying that he couldn't turn them down. Their show, of course, was more about attacking me and dropping F bombs nonstop, along with shitty musicians that couldn't play instruments correctly. Just a lot of noise and shouting. These people were unprepared and had their suitcases laid out in front of the camera, blowing out tunes and making just a lot of noise. Garbage, to say the least. They called themselves the Wednesday Night Karate Explosion on Wednesday nights when my show came on Thursday nights. Their shitty show didn't last long. They removed obscenities and constant F bombs. I referred to the show as the Wednesday Night Crap Explosion. LOL made reference to him by saying starring Red Pube Face and assortment of other dysfunctional idiots and trolls. Killed brain cells watching that bitch at his wannabe show. I made fun of him by wearing a mask of his face and make a reference as the BTK killer Dennis Rader as his father, poking at him for being so fucked up and his dad leaving him at a young age, getting incarcerated for killing different women. The ending of the skit is where Redacted is crying out for his dad, and his dad said, "Leave me alone," and disappeared into the night. Needless to say, their craptastic show didn't last long at all. Once the show was cancelled, their activity ceased, with more trolls lurking on the horizon doing more shit. Last heard, Michael Redacted was at a chain of Five Guys and a burger. I made threats to come in there and cause a scene. The bitch obviously had some mental issues like most trolls do. With the ending of the crap explosion, so was the ending of him and those bitches.